Ladies and gentlemen, it is tourney time. I am Pr0totype, and I am recording episode 70 of Pr0totype on my solo game design podcast, which is currently centered around Cosmonarchy, the most impressive and ambitious project ever made within the StarCraft 1 engine. We are looking at a very fun time ahead because it is time for Acropolis number 2. I'm very pumped about the tournament. It's already begun. I'm actually recording this episode of Pr0totype a bit late as a result of that, and we'll be going over the initial results of the tournament, my open bracket policy that I hope to be putting into place pretty soon, and of course the plans for the casted games during Gauntlet stages going forward, and including the Gauntlet stages for Acropolis number 2. We do have 2 of them. It will be a good time, I'm sure. I'll also be covering a thing that I did yesterday, the 26th. The evening, I streamed Worldbuilding Q&A, mostly focused on Xibalba, but also featuring some discussion of Cosmonarchy. So I do think that will be a staple of the week, where every week I'll do at least one of those, or maybe it'll be like a carved out section of another stream that I do that's maybe more general, not sure. But I'll probably be isolating those into their own playlist at some point soon, and maybe making custom UI for that stream and stuff like that. So I hope that you will join us for those. It was a fun time. It was really cool and gratifying and kind of surreal that a bunch of people gathered around to start asking me questions about how the stuff that I've been working on and I've been writing myself and sort of stuff is all about, like what it's all about and how all that stuff is done. I know it's kind of been in some ways old news because Myrian and the Shambler and a bunch of people, obviously another one being Ryan, who goes by the name Concealed Organic on the server. There's a bunch of people who have been enthused by the work and the projects and stuff like that. But it was still quite gratifying, I think, to hear some questions fielded from a bunch of different individuals about that. And so, yeah, shout out to Skates and Eggs and Jujic, who were asking questions about Cosmonarchy. That's also pretty cool. And just kind of bizarre that I get to do streams like that. But hey, I'll take it. I like it. So, we do have to get into some of the stuff that's actually more pertinent to the tournament, and that is, of course, where we will begin things here. I am implementing what I'm going to call the open bracket policy for this event and for other events. And this means that all replays, as soon as they are validated, will immediately be made available for anybody to go and download. And I think I'll be posting this through the Mega solution, the file hosting solution that I've already got for the overall like replay sharing that we've already been doing on the tournament page of the Cosmonarchy sort of, what would you call it, like the repo? I don't know exactly what you'd call that, but like the main website for Cosmonarchy has a subsite for tournament play, and you can actually go back and watch old replays, assuming you backdate your client accordingly. And so overall, I think that's pretty good. That's definitely a nice thing to have in our back pocket, and a nice little historical archive as a result. So I think, personally, as we get a little bit closer to building up, these titans that are going to stay alive in the Gauntlet later on, one of the things I was struggling with is I obviously want to cast some of these matches. But imagine, for example, that I said all of this week, I just casted like opening round matches and second and third round matches, right? And then I'm like, what are we going to do about that, right? Because if I release a video tomorrow, Monday, or whatever, I'm recording this on Sunday, right? So if I release a video on the 28th of October, Monday, and that's of an opening match between, say, Arbuz Budesh and Louis, I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that guy's name. And it's like, okay, well, now you know how Louis plays, maybe his next opponent is going to be more advantaged, right? And you compare that to if I post like Mystery Meat versus Barisu, but that doesn't get released until like Friday, then by that point, he's already played his other matches. So there's no skin in the game for him, no risk there. And so what I'm getting at from that is that I don't really like the idea that we get like this disproportionate access to the certain games and replays and stuff. I would prefer to just allow that to be entirely open. I also think that opening up the bracket and making sure that the replays are uploaded and ready for anybody to download and review is a good thing for not just like the players who might play them in the Gauntlet later on, but also for anybody who might be interested in how those matches went and doesn't want to wait for a cast, and anybody who might just be interested in reviewing them. Maybe they saw it on a cast and then they want to go back and review the replays at their own leisure and maybe try to take things a bit slower instead of having to watch on YouTube or whatever, right? So I think there's a lot of advantages to it, even if they end up being rather niche. But the main thing that in my mind, as far as I'm concerned, it's just way better to do it this way, because what you end up getting as a result of this mechanism is you don't have to worry about the same degree of like, oh, it's unfair that my match got profiled. We did actually have a situation kind of like this where Pr0totype and Jujic battled it out at some point, and I released a cast over of that match, and then I think Pr0totype played against Veek, and Veek was able to defeat Pr0totype, and I don't know if Veek actually watched the cast in that case, but it would have been plausible for him to watch that, versus like, I didn't cast the first Veek match, and so Pr0totype couldn't have studied Veek from that same way. So that's like one specific example where I've already seen this, that there's the potential for this thing to happen, and it was kind of bugging me that it was. So I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. With that said, I do think that we can talk about the results now that I've essentially laid out that policy. I will make an effort to, by the time this video goes public, release the replays already and make a big announcement in the tournaments channel and stuff. And so if, though, you are listening to this and you have a better idea in mind for how you would want to get these replays distributed rather than having to go to a mega folder and like wait to see if the match had been actually played, let me know. Maybe we can come up with some kind of database that actually searches certain attributes, and we can tag files with a certain set of attributes, and then you can download those files. And that would be useful for things like, is this, it would have a match code. So it would be like upper match 1 or opener 3 or whatever. And then it would also have participants, and then maybe it would also have maps. So I don't know if anybody who's listening to this has the ability or knowledge of programs that already let you do that. But let me know if you have ideas, basically, is what I'm getting at. Because that would be ideal, is if we could browse that super easy, and then okay, I'm going up against, say, the Night Fox, or I'm going up against Art of Turtle. Let me just go ahead and jump into this replay browser thing and search those two players. I'm going to be I want to see about how do I play if I end up a Muspelheim? How do I play against Zerg? Well, let me see if I can find matches on Muspelheim, and then I'll just filter for when there's people playing my race versus Zerg. Stuff like that would be super helpful. I don't know how easy it is to use any software that already exists to serve this purpose. I know that there exists software or web services or whatever that will allow you to tag or categorize things, but I don't know how flexible they are, and if they also allow you to upload files in association with that, or if it's just for like local storage and for your own personal use, as opposed to like being something that anybody can browse on the internet. So I will try to investigate that as well. But at the very least, we know that the mega file is there. Plus, you can cross-reference it with the bracket, which is publicly available on the Wikipedia page. I'll also try to remember to link that bracket in the description so you can see that. But you can visit the bracket and view it, and so you would be able to see, okay, upper match, 1B is the Night Fox versus Cannoli. And so I can just go see that, and then I can say, all right, I'm going to watch that match because I'm playing against one of those two players next or whatever, right? That would be something that you could conceivably witness if you wanted to. So I think that is a good thing to include. I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's a cool idea. And now let us actually talk about the very exciting Acropolis number 2 results so far. As you can see, part of the bracket has already proceeded quite fast. We managed to squeeze in 2 matches between that featured the Night Fox just today. So he actually decided to play against HitEmUp right after defeating Cannoli. But let's go all the way back, because I think there's some really interesting results to zero in on here. There were 2 upsets that occurred in the bracket, and Veek was not able to find time to participate in the tournament. So even though he decided to forfeit, but it was, I will say, we've already talked about this privately, but it was a bit weird, because if he had known that and had communicated that to me, I just would have pulled him out of the bracket before finalizing it and setting up the matches. So that was a bit odd, and also a bit unclear, because I thought he was initially just going to forfeit the first match because it was versus somebody who was an American, and so like the time zone differential was hard. Whereas then his second match was versus a Euro, and I was like, oh, that'll work out. And then he's like, no, I also forfeit this one. So as we get into the lower bracket, you guys will see Vika's out of the tourney, and those who would have played against him end up obviously just proceeding forward. So that's a little bit of a mention of that. But going beyond that, we have Art of Turtle making it past Benno. That is expected. Benno, I have not seen his Terran. I haven't seen him practice that much. I know he did do a little bit of practicing. I hope that he is still going to be good for further matches in the tourney. I definitely want to see his Terran, but it doesn't surprise me that Art of Turtle, who has been grinding like a son of a gun, like if I took Art of Turtle when I gave him his initial seed of, oh, he's back and he's playing actively again, 16th was fair, but as of right now, I would actually say he might be top 8 in the bracket in the context, or maybe like top 12 or something in the bracket based on his current level of form and the fact that he's really grinding it out. He's been playing lots of games. He's been playing games against HitEmUp, against top tier caliber, but I repeat myself, opposition. He's just been playing it and gunning it, so no surprises there. The Night Fox 2-0 Lucifirius. Lucifirius, I'm sure, made those games interesting and entertaining. I haven't seen them. Night Fox did say he was scared at one point, so that can only tell me that there was some cheese and shenanigans that were cooked up. It doesn't surprise me Night Fox took the game. Does kind of surprise me he stuck with Terran, because he's also been playing Protoss and Zerg, and obviously he's known as a Zerg player first and foremost. But anyway, the big surprise was definitely Cannoli taking out Smarty Cakes, and a 2-0 in fact. Maybe they were two close games. I haven't seen them yet. I definitely want to cast those. Cannoli hasn't had as much success. He had his cast over debut versus Jujic fairly recently, and it was a 3-0 clean sweep in favor of the Protoss player there, Jujic, who, by the way, has been a hell of an admin this tournament. He's already run, I think, 8 or 9 games, so just crazy shout out to him for helping me run. He's definitely on the leaderboard for most games admins, right? I think Shambler's admin 2 or 3. And Ozlix, I think, admin 2. I've admin 4 so far, and I think Jujic again is at like 8. So he's like far and away outstretched as like the top guy. So really big shout out to him. He hasn't even played his first match yet because Dinoman has had to reschedule that. So that's pretty wild. In 2 days, he's admined 8 matches without even playing his own, which he was also available for. So, imagine he could have actually been involved in way more. Anyway, Jujic was able to pretty summarily execute Cannoli in 2 of the games, and then the third game was much closer, and it showed Cannoli's ability to think outside the box, perhaps, and be pretty interesting and savvy. And I do think that Cannoli has potential. I even called out as much in the video to see him take out Smarty in a 2-0. And then also, I mean, we're skipping ahead into the second round, but he also took the Night Fox to 3 games and apparently was in a position where he might have been able to win the whole series. I mean, by definition, he was in a position to do that, but like the games were close. That is what has been reported to me, and that is very impressive. So just wanted to shout out Cannoli here on a little bit of an extended time and mention, dude, yeah, versus Smarty, that's pretty legit stuff. Remember, I just mentioned you can go and grab all of these replays. By the time this video comes out, you can check the description. You can go to the tournament website, whatever. You should be able to find access to these replays and see them for yourself if you're eager to get a jump on, Pronogo is going to take too long to cast this match, or he might not even cast this match. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that I will mention, is that the replays that I'm going to cast with pace are going to be like Cannoli Smarty is definitely going to be one. HitEmUp Art of Turtle is going to be one. Probably the Night Fox Cannoli is going to be one. So like those 3 I'm definitely going to be casting on the sooner side of things. I'd love to cast K-Dusk because I haven't cast him before. He did fall to Dead Infested 2-0. Obviously, Son of Alcatraz just moving past Fleek due to the forfeit. That's probably going to get cast at some point. But remember, there's so many matches to cast and only so many days to do it. So just wanted to point that out there. But if you're worried about like, I want to know how Benno did. Well, by the time I cast that match, it'll probably be like months later down the line. And it's a replay drought for a period of time. Let me just pull up this replay or something and go on a casting spree where I just go through all the Gauntlet matches and cast. Maybe that's going to be something that I do as a collection, just so that there's a stream out there, recording of all of those matches being cast at some point. Anyway, shout out to this situation here, though. This is wild. Meanwhile, obviously, Dead Infested making it past K-Dusk. You have to say that's expected. Dead has been grinding a lot. Not surprised to see him take down K-Dusk. I don't know how K-Dusk plays, though. So maybe I'll be seeing some promise in him the same way that I was just talking about Cannoli. And maybe he'll surprise in the lower bracket. You never know. Meanwhile, Jack Yelansky makes it past Toyota Miguel. I actually adminned this series, and I can say that Jack and Toyota, I mean, they were kind of making it a contest as to who could, throw their units away a little bit harder than the opponent. And Toyota narrowly won that in the first match that they played. The second match, I cannot believe Jack won. All I can say is that the second match, Jack did like a ridiculous build that probably should never work. And, I might cast that series sometime and show you guys what I'm talking about, but let's just say I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. But Jack does move on, nonetheless, 2-0, flawless start. So far, by the way, I think, with the exception of the forfeits, I can't count those. Neblime released a video where he went through and predicted like 2-0 for Art of Turtle, 2-0 for the Night Fox, 2-0 for Smarty Cakes. Obviously, that's wrong. 2-0 for Veek. Obviously, that's wrong because of the forfeit. Again, I wouldn't count that. And then 2-0 for Dead Infested, 2-0 for Jack. Like he predicted all of these, right? 2-0 for Mystery Meat as well, which did come to pass. And 2-0 for Arbuz, and like all that stuff, right? He's predicted all of this stuff. And so I would say so far his predictions are mostly accurate, but I do love to just point out, like, the fact is like Cannoli, and then later on when we get to the 3-Crow Balethal series, like, man, those are some results that I think are pretty wild, pretty interesting. And of course there were some last minute alterations, like Dinoman switched to Z from random at the last second there. So he's in a position where I'm not really sure if that would change Neblime's poll on that result, which we haven't seen the result anyway, but like some things did end up changing in the bracket. But just want to point that out there. It's like Neblime's got prediction videos going. We obviously got all of these games being played in the first place. Like, Cosmonarchy is pretty epic, guys. Just saying. If you're missing out now, Gauntlet B signups did open up yesterday, and we already have a number of people who have signed up. So definitely get in while the going is while the water's hot, while the going is getting tough, but not super tough yet. It hasn't been gentrified yet, just saying. I mean, it's getting there, though. It's getting there. Obviously, we haven't seen the Dinoman Jujik set yet, but Arbuz does 2-0 Luai. Luai looked like he was in a position to potentially win game 1, definitely win game 2. If he just had any knowledge about the game state, a little bit more knowledge about the game state, I think he actually would have at least taken this series to 3 games. Because Arbuz went for a very greedy build in game 2, a kind of cheeky build in game 1. Luai could have punished. I think any other Zerg probably would have punished. I can't speak to the strategy that happened in game 1, which is a Warden Rush, but I can, because I haven't seen that play out before, so I don't actually know what the follow-ups usually are. But the second game, like, basically Luai just didn't know he could kill the Protoss units. Like, he just thought, oh, it's Protoss units, they're probably strong, I shouldn't fight them. it was lattice units, and like triple lattice into Nexus, where there was no actual units. There's like 4 idols or something, 3 idols on a simulacrum, I think, versus like 4 hydras and 2 Izzies. I think that was the army. Like, Luai definitely could have just walked up the ramp and killed Arbuz right then and there. It's just, it would have been a very, very difficult situation. And maybe you'd have to rally units to finish him off or something after that, but I'm not sure. I think maybe the army itself could have just won. That's the kind of situation that really makes you scared to see. And the fact that Luai is brand new and his first PvP games, his player versus player games, were versus Arbuz, like, that's impressive that he was in a position to not actually just get rolled over. He didn't just get rolled over. That was quite impressive. So I look forward. He has my attention, right? Or whatever. He has my curiosity now. He has my attention. I don't know. Like, that's interesting. I love to see that. So tournament debutant, finding some limited success versus a man who is as formidable as Arbuz. I think that has to be warranted some respect and nods along the way. So far, the only tournament debutant to actually take a series that we've covered has actually been Cannoli. So shout out to him as well. Another shout out to Cannoli. Balethal upsets 3-Crow 2-0. This was not on my bingo card. I thought for sure 3-Crow would have some shenanigans planned, or just straight up use his more recent practice games and stuff. But Balethal, he just decided to make 13 gateways, apparently. That's what I was told. So he's unlocked the hidden strategy, and he will now face off against Shopkeeper Dog, which is actually going to be running later on tonight. What is it? It is 7:30 local time in the evening, and so in about an hour and a half, we will see Balethal and Dog fight each other. And that will be interesting. But I don't have that result yet, so I can't tell you guys. I would imagine Dog is heavily favored, but Balethal could 13 gate him. I don't know. It could happen. Now, Lundier did make Shopkeeper Dog a little bit concerned, and apparently he forced diadems at one point. I am very impressed, very, very impressed. That was an amazing accomplishment versus Shopkeeper Dog. Lundier does fall to the lower bracket, though, 2-0 in favor of Dog. That result is in keeping with what Neblime predicted. Gerald Storm 2-0ing in Ozlix, also in keeping, although Ozlix had a way in to some of the series. Like, he could have definitely done some damage there. ZVZ can be pretty volatile. And an Ozlix, I think, was able to maybe do some things or another. Aoud making it past Myriad Colors. Haven't seen this set. Didn't really hear much about it. I think it might have just been straightforward wins in favor of Aoud. He will face Gerald Storm. Has faced Gerald Storm already. Looking forward to talking about that series, because I admin to that series, so I can talk about it. But first, we just have to mention Biddy B 2-0ing Ava Angelion. I'm kind of surprised. I thought Ava would be more of a match for BDB than that. But I also, Nebulheim called this, and I think he called it well, the cheese factor of BDB, him being random and probably not saying his race, because that's his advantage. His God-given right is to not say his race when he rolls random. We're going to take his right away when we add the Escosi, because when the Escosi get added and you could be one of 4 races instead of 3, the matchups get ballooning, and no, the game needs to tell you, I think, which race you have. That's my thinking anyway. Well, maybe I'll evolve my thinking over time, but that's what I got for you for now. So yeah, those are the initial results. I think it's looking likely Dynoman might have to forfeit the first matchup against Jujic, in which case it'll be Arbuz Jujic, but for now we have not decided on that one just yet. I think if I don't hear anything by the end of the night, I'll probably say so, because, 2 days into the event not being able to show up for the opener, I think at that point it's fair game to DQ. We should probably instantiate that in the rules. Like you have, if you don't make contact in 24 hours after the event starts, it's probably a good time to call it, right? And so yeah, I think we're leaning towards that right now. But again, much like the Balefall Dog set, I don't actually have the result for that yet because it hasn't been decided. But we can go to the other matches. HitEmUp making it 2-0 over Art of Turtle. Maybe not a surprise. HitEmUp was very nervous before that match, and maybe even a little bit before the following match, but things went very nicely for him. I think this is what everybody was saying. He kept saying, I will probably not win. It's like, bro, you say this every time, and then you dumpster people. So, yeah, pretty wild stuff. Meanwhile, we do have the Night Fox taking down Cannoli in a hard-fought 3-game set. Very excited to cast that game at some point. That looks like it's a nice, solid one. I look forward to checking it out. Props to Cannoli for taking Fox there. Apparently he played a bunch of games versus the Night Fox semi-recently. Like he was grinding before the tournament, and that's why he was able to take down Smarty. Impressive stuff. Maybe one of those days, the practice games that they played against each other might be revealed if any of them were like worth a cast or something. Fox can post them up. That would be pretty good. Post them up, the alternative ID for HitEmUp. The Night Fox goes up against HitEmUp. It doesn't end up working out for him. He does fall to the lower bracket, but he was a pretty good sport about it. I think HitEmUp thinks that the Night Fox doesn't like him because Fox usually dodges practice games versus him, but I guess they were practicing earlier today, and then maybe the reason for the dodges other than that in this particular case would have been, oh shit, I might play against the guy, but he knocks down to the lower bracket. HitEmUp now in the qualifying spot. Upper qualifier A will be HitEmUp's domain, and he will face off against the winner of Jack Mystery Meat and Dead Infested, which you might call is probably going to be Mystery Meat. I will point out Mystery Meat has not played any practice games or any official games since Tyrant's Tale. He has not played at all since the show match between him and Arbuz. So just wanted to point that out there. There's a chance that Jack could get him. There's a chance that Dead Infested could get him. I would not say that that's an overdetermined result just yet. But if HitEmUp does end up facing Mystery Meat, I think no matter who he faces, he's going to be the favor. Maybe Mystery Meat. I don't think we've seen Mystery Meat versus HitEmUp. I don't think we've seen that. So that will actually be a really cool matchup if it does happen. Just saying. Just pointing that out. Now, let us move on to, Dead Infested over Son of Alcatraz. I haven't seen Son of Alcatraz's Terran. Didn't hear much about the series, don't know what its makeup was, but Dead Infested moving on, that is, again, expected. So far, he's had Terran-only opponents. If Mystery Meat makes it past Jack, which I would predict, then Dead Infested would play Terran some more, and then he just hopes that HitEmUp rolls Terran every game, and then he can just do nothing but PvT. That would be great. Of course, I think that would be the first best of 5 Dead Infested would be playing if he made it past Mystery Meat. I'm not sure. I think so, though. That's pretty cool. At least in Cosmonarchy, it'd be the first official best of 5 for him. So that's interesting. That's pretty neat. Now, further down, I would say Jujic is favored to get over Dynoman, and then Arbuz is obviously favored over Jujic, and then other than that, I'm guessing Dog will beat Balethal tonight, although this might be closer. This might be 2-1 or something silly. It might be 2 close games. Dog is favored over Balethal, and Arbuz is favored over Dog, so I'm predicting that Arbuz Budesh will make it to that upper qualifier B, and kick these two homies, Jujic and Dog, down to the lower bracket. Meanwhile, I would say Ayud, he ended up winning versus Gerald Storm, and that series was pretty good. I mean, obviously that one actually got casted, so you guys can watch the cast over for that if you're interested. But Ayud taking Gerald out, I will say it was two very kind of like lopsided games initially because of early game aggression, and then the third game was just kind of like a single oops moment, basically, that set Gerald really far behind in a game that otherwise I would say he was mildly favored and had a slight edge in, and then he just made this single big issue. Single big oopsie of trying to target down the Iron Foundry with his entire army on Muspelheim so that he could access that back base instead of making one Ovaleth or just attacking it with some of his army. You never know. And that allowed Gerald or Aoud to clear out the third and also get a little bit of a tempo when it comes to the army on his opponent. So, ouch. But looking at Aoud's play, I would say he is mortal. Top Ramen can defeat him. I would predict Top Ramen will beat Biddy, and maybe that will be an interesting game where Biddy can random cheese, especially since he doesn't say his race. There's definitely a possibility for Ramen to get kind of caught up by a speed bump, but I would say that's only possible for Biddy to take one game that way. I don't think Ramen would drop the whole set. So I'm thinking it'll be Ramen versus Aoud, and I'm guessing Ramen will beat Aoud. I'm actually going to say, I'm going to go the Neblime style, and I'm going to say Ramen gets him 2-0. But I don't know, as I'm predicting that, again, what did I just say about Ramen versus Biddy? Biddy could take a game because Ramen is sometimes exploitable in the early stages of the game. He really shines in that mid-game moment in the macro style, right? And I think Aoud has a lot of early game strategies and pseudo cheeses that he wants to throw at throw at his opponents. And so Aoud's early game domain could actually be the place where Ramen gets bopped 2-1. Ramen could drop a game. I would still say he's favored though. So I'm actually going to say 2-0 Biddy, 2-1 Aoud. I'm going to split the difference on that and say Biddy will try it. Aoud will try something more refined and get Ramen in some game. That means that we're set up for Ramen versus Arbuz. I actually don't know how to call that series. Robin said that he's been struggling versus Protoss recently. I don't know if they've played any matches recently as practice games or otherwise, Ramen and Arbuz. Obviously, Ramen did 3-1 Neblime in Tyrant's Tale after Neblime reverse swept Arbuz in the Elimination 3 game. He went on to the lower final, and Ramen 3-1'd him. Once again, Maxium being the domain of Neblime, but that's not in this tournament, so don't have to worry about that, obviously. I'll say this one is probably 3-2 Arbuz, but it could also be 3-1 Arbuz. I don't know if, Ramen could 3-2 it. Obviously, if I'm predicting 3-2 for any player, it could also be 3-2 for the other guy. But I think the hedge would be 3-2 Arbuz. Don't be too surprised if it's 3-1 Arbuz, because I think the games that Ramen would win in this would probably be pretty close ones. So that is what I have to say about that. We'll set our I was going to say set our guys, but like GUISE, not GAIZ, which is hello gaze. That's what's his name? This is Jimmy. That guy. He always says he goes by like 40 different usernames depending on platform and where he's at. So it's a little bit confusing, but. He's a cool guy. He's a cool guy. He's a cool gaze. Hello gaze. That's what he says. But no, guys as in GUISE, you're setting your visage on. Anyway, we're setting our sights on the lower bracket. Lucy versus Smarty Cakes. This is going to be played on Monday. I do predict Smarty to take Lucy, but Lucy could cheese and get at least one win on the board. So the debate for me is whether Smarty 2-1s him or 2-0s him. And I'm going to say 2-1. I'm going to bet 2-1 just because I like Lucy, dude. I think Lucy is a cool guy, and it would be really awesome if he could get on the board. That would make this a castable set. Again, mentioned Veek forfeiting. He's not out, and K-Dusk moves up. That means we're going to be looking at Toyota Miguel and Jesper Risu. I'd say Toyota is obviously favored in terms of game knowledge and recent grinding. I haven't seen Barisu's game against Mystery Meat, and he did have to surrender in the middle of the second game because he suddenly got busy. And so... that means that for my money, I'm guessing that since he lasted about 15-20 minutes versus Mystery Meat, he's not a total pushover. But that being said, TVT is the hardest matchup to totally close out. At least that's what I've been told by a bunch of other people. So I'll be interested in seeing that one. The loser of Jujik Dinoman will face off against Luai, and if Dinoman is also forfeited out, similar to Veek, then I guess Luai will just move on. When it says loser of 24, that is Jack Mystery Meat. I'm predicting that to be Jack Yelansky. So we could actually see Luai's next test be ZVZ, depending on how the Dinoman stuff goes. I mean, if it goes Jujik Dinoman, and Dinoman actually does play, or doesn't, and gets cast down to the lower bracket, but then does play the lower bracket game, then it would be ZVZ anyway. So I'd say Luai is likely to hit them ZVZs no matter what. So it'll be an interesting time for him. I'm not sure how he'll handle that. Maybe he can play against Cannoli at some point. Then we've got, obviously, if I'm predicting, I wasn't really talking about the other matches, right? But 26 is Balethal Dog. I'm going to guess K-Dusk has to go up against Balethal and the horrors of the 13 gate. That's probably going to be a 2-1 in favor of Balethal. But I'm predicting kind of blindly because I haven't seen K-Dusk yet. And then match 25 is Arbuz versus most likely Jujic. 25 will face off against probably Toyota. I'm predicting Toyota 2-0, although they'll probably be long games and silly ones. Toyota 2-0, and then into Jujic. I think Jujic will 2-0 Toyota, actually. I don't know if Toyota has much play in that set. Apparently, he does pretty well again when he's not fighting against Protoss that are going for the Architect spam, and I don't know how well Jujic plays against that. So maybe it could actually be 2-1, as I'm thinking about it a little bit more. But I'm gonna stick to backing my homie, Jujic, who's adminned all these games, and I'm going to say 2-0, baby. And he'll move on to face off against probably Balethal, PvP, in which case, may the better 13-gator win. Whoever you are, you're going to face the Night Fox. So there is that. Oh, by the way, if Smarty makes it past Lucy as I'm predicting, I think he might even upset Gerald 2-1, but that's going to be a tight series. I'm predicting a 3-game set out of that no matter what, and I will say Gerald has a slight edge. I mean, that's based on seeding as well. It's 7th and 8th, right? Either way, who's 28? Okay. So that's probably Biddy Benno versus Biddy. I'm actually going to say Biddy takes that 2-0, but I haven't seen Benno's Terra, and he might be better than I expect. Maybe it's 2-1. Either way, that means that we're looking at Gerald Biddy most likely. It could also be Smarty Biddy. I think either way, Biddy's time ends, and we're going to be looking at, what is this? This is too far ahead to predict. I guess that would probably be either dead or mystery meat. We'll leave that for later. We'll leave the other sides of the bracket for later. I'm not going to predict the whole bracket right now. But yeah, I think basically what this looks like to me is like Gerald moves on to face off against whoever loses to Mystery Meat, is my thinking. But, that could be wrong because Dead Infested could actually upset Mystery Meat. It wouldn't even be that far-fetched considering his lack of practice right now. Mystery Meat's lack of practice, that is. So, If Mystery Meat falls down here, I think he wins versus Gerald. He also should win versus Smarty. So no matter who wins this match, whoever wins this match beats Biddy is my prediction. Okay, so then I think this match is probably, if Mystery Meat goes down here, he's in the lower qualifier. If Dead Infested goes down here, that's going to be a tough match. And I think Gerald would beat Dead Infested. Smarty might. I think maybe Dead Infested could get the better of him. Smarty tilts in a way that is a little bit hard to tell. He just kind of like doesn't play to his potential when he's a little bit upset, or if there's like other things to his going on in his life that's preventing him from grinding as much as he wants to or whatever. Like he gets a little bit down. Whereas Dead Infested tilts a lot more outwardly, but maybe that like helps him recenter a little bit too. So I'm not really sure about that one, but I do think that like the first game, whoever wins the first game probably wins that series if it's Smarty. If it's Gerald, I think Gerald probably wins the set 2-0. But Dead Infested could surprise me. Dead Infested could surprise everybody. He might not even be down there. But the Night Fox versus Mystery Meat would be a banger match. I'm just saying. All right, so let's go back to where we were at. So we were just talking about Luai. He's probably facing Dino Man and then Jakulansky. Do I predict Luai beat Jakulansky? I need to see his EVZ first before I can trust him with that, but I'll say 2-1 Jack. I'll say Jack wins this set 2-1, and it's a close nail-biter ZVZ set. Gives Luai the experience required to sign up for Gauntlet B and absolutely smash fools in that one. That's my prediction right now. But honestly, like that's where my brain is telling me, dude, you haven't seen this guy play that much. You've seen him play one series ever, and it was a 2-0 in not in his favor. So why would you predict him for anything? But no, I think he's a Giga Chad. I think he's got that energy. I think he can do it. So my heart is telling me to predict him 2-1 in his favor, but my brain is saying Jack has it. So we'll say, Jack, you've got my brain. Please take good care of it. Please don't let it down. And then, I think 3Crow is going to pretty comfortably. He made it past Lundier, and I don't know how close those games were, but it was apparently cheese games. I mean, it's Lundier. That's what you would expect. This is like Cheese City. I would feel like this is Cheese City, but maybe 3Crow is playing a bit more conservatively, depending on just he might be feeling it. He's like, oh man, Balethal just slapped me. I got to come back. He is a really nice match against Son of Alcatraz. Alcatraz not the strongest player, to put it mildly, but. I haven't seen his Terran. His Terran might, again, I didn't hear anything about the games versus Dead Infested. His Terran might have a little bit of a surprise factor there. So 3Crow will have to download that replay set and watch and see if he can notice anything that he has to worry about. Meanwhile, in Ozlix versus Myriad Colors, I was pulling for my boy Onitar because I do think that he has some aggressive tendencies that could be difficult for a Protoss to deal with. I haven't seen Myriad set versus Aud. It's a very different matchup, though, PvT. So looking at PvZ, I'd say Onitar is the slight favorite despite the seeding, because Myriad hasn't actually been very active. I initially gave him preferential seeding because he had a successful set of matches competitively in the level that, over Myriad over Onitar and similar levels. Meanwhile, though, he hasn't played that much. He hasn't been practicing outside of the tourney games either. So I'm going to, at least he hasn't been practicing like publicly, with people that I can see. I'm going to say Myriad will at least take a match. I'm going to say an Onitar would move over 2-1. But I think whoever moves past each other here in this set, they're not getting past Cannoli. That guy's got it on lock, clearly. And so I think Cannoli 2-0s whoever makes it past out of this series and sets up a match against Art of Turtle. And dude, I really don't know who wins. Like, Art of Turtle is hyper aggro. I think Art of Turtle will probably 2-0 Ava, but Ava does play a lot of ZVZ, actually. Like, Ava played ZVZ versus, I think it was the Night Fox. Gets a lot of tips from the Night Fox as well. The Night Fox does provide tips to those who ask. Obviously, the Night Fox is just like nurturing all of these Zerg players, right? He's out here trying to hey Cannoli, grind with me for 8 hours before your tournament match, bro. It's like let's just go ahead and get you up to speed. Let's grind, dude. And then fucking to Ava, all this information about the Zerg race. Like, here's what you should do. Like, he's really all in on that part. He should be in a way he should be a coach. I can't say that though because he's already obviously one game away from the qualifier. So, he's doing well for himself as well, but he's like out here coaching people like mad, giving them some nice little tips for success. I don't know that that's going to be enough to offset the grind versus Art of Turtle, though. It is ZVZ, but AOT does pretty well in those, actually. Historically, he's gone, a positive record versus Jack Yelansky, a positive record versus Taco Cake, who's a Zerg that didn't sign up for Gauntlet A. Might sign up for B. We're not sure. But overall has been having an interesting time, right? I think Art of Turtle, despite his lackluster in his own mind. I haven't watched it yet, but his showing versus HitEmUp, he said that he wasn't happy with it. But it's up against HitEmUp. I don't know how many people are happy to play against him. And meanwhile, we've got Ava out here who practices an okay amount. But I would say, looking at this setup, I'm going to go ahead and guess Art of Turtle will 2-0, and then we're going to be looking at Cannoli Art of Turtle. And I have to predict Art of Turtle, because he's just a grinder. But I would really love to see Cannoli do it. I would love to see him somehow make it happen. It would be really cool, really epic. So I'm going to say 2-0 in favor of Art of Turtle. But I really do think Cannoli could at least take a game. Like, he's impressed me a lot. So let's see what happens there. I just feel like ZVZ is an under-tapped matchup, but I'm sure that... I'm sure that Fox will trade him up because that's his pet project now, apparently. By the way, we could see some serious ZVZ action at some point. Like, you think Luai versus Dino Man, then Luai versus Jack. Meanwhile, we've got AOT Ava. We've got maybe an Onitar Cannoli. We've got what I'm predicting, Cannoli Art of Turtle. We've got... What would you say then? It's like 3-Crow Luai or 3-Crow Jack. I think that's a tough match for 3-Crow. Maybe if either one of those Zergs makes it past him, then we're talking loser of 40. Which one is that? Okay, there's no chance for a Zerg there. There's a small chance for Biddy, I guess. And so Biddy could 1/3 of the time roll Zerg, all the 100% of the time. But imagine if we had ZVZ like that whole way. Who's 39? Okay, there's no chance for a ZVZ at this matchup, but the qualifier could be it. Could be. I don't know. You never know, dude. Pretty exciting stuff. Hopefully you enjoyed my very slapdash coverage of the bracket. It was a good time, and I talked for about 40 minutes about it, so that's pretty funny. Now, of course, we will talk about a completely different story. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this next section will be pretty fast, actually. We're just going to be talking about the plans that I have for casting games during Gauntlet stages. Because of the open bracket policy I elucidated earlier, I will be casting games as and when I want to. When it comes to the Gauntlet matches, we'll probably be spending almost all of our time casting matches that are played officially. And maybe we'll make some time for more traditional castovers where it's all about the practice games or the wacky games, or obviously Flashback Friday. I'm not sure if we'll suspend Flashback Friday yet for the purposes of the Gauntlet matches. I could see an argument to do so, and I could also see an argument to keep it because it's fun and epic. So I guess we'll just see if people have a specific Flashback Friday candidate that they want me to look at. I still have plenty of games to go back for, but overall, I would say let me know what you're thinking. And if there's a specific game you want to see me do sooner rather than later, and you think it supersedes tournament games, then let me know. And if I don't get any requests like that, then I'll probably skip it for this week at the very least. So I did want to mention that because you will see some tournament games in the very near future and for the foreseeable future. Really, we'll probably be casting gauntlet matches and such. At the very least, we'll obviously do casts for the live, like the qualifiers and stuff. I don't know if we'll be streaming them, but the qualifying series will definitely be cast because it's important for us to sort of coronate those who make it into the battlement stage and sort of have some kind of fanfare about that. So I think that's a logical thing to do. Whether we do it live or not is a separate thing. As far as like us being there when the games happen and doing the casting then, I also don't know who I'll even be casting with. Nableim is away. Mesk is no longer in the community. I'm thinking about who else I would maybe cast with. Obviously, sometimes Shadow Fury would do it, but he hasn't been playing actively. He's mostly been like following along on the side. So got to think about who else might join us for the cast. Veek is obviously very busy these days, so I don't know if he would even do it. And then, of course, there's the interminable Jujik. He's unassailable. He might end up being a casting buddy for a good while here. We'll see. We'll see. All right, so with that outlined, we can talk a little bit about the world-building streams. The world-building Q&A streams began yesterday, the 27th of October. The 26th of October. Today's the 27th when I'm recording this. So the 26th of October, we did a Zabalba Q&A dev stream, world-building Q&A stream. I will be doing those more often, and I think I will go ahead and do those at least once a week, I think is fair to say. There is a question as to whether or not, like, you know, when it can be put in and for how long it will go. I think it'll go until I have no more questions to answer and have no more things to write, because it's also a world building stream. It's Q&A, but it's also, you know, I'm going to be writing new stuff. I'm going to be developing new lore or elucidating existing lore in a different way, and, you know, maybe writing out and plans for different campaigns and stuff or whatever, right? And so you're going to see me do some work on the written stuff, on the written contents of the website, adding a write up for the Ascosi, adding a write up for the potential 5th race if we were to get there, stuff like that. And so I think it's all safe to say all of those things and be like, hey guys, we have the ability to you know, we have more information about the different races and the setting and all this other stuff. Yeah, so there you go. That is what I've got for now. I do think that the in my opinion anyway, I think these streams are pretty cool and epic, and it would be great to basically just develop Zabalba, Pangea, Onitar, Cosmonarchy's Crescillian sector, of course, all that stuff. It would be cool to develop those settings more and further. And so that is what I will be doing for the world building streams, and I hope that you join us for that. So without further ado, we'll get into the community roundup and the coffee questions. So thank you once again for joining us for a prototype. As usual, we're going to kick things off looking at some of the homies that have joined the Discord server recently. And by recently, I mean in the last 7 days, or since the last podcast. Obviously, one of the last people that I shouted out was SS Stand. Haven't actually heard high nor tail, seen high nor tail of him. But yeah, he did join, and he's got that Jonathan Blow fucking character from Braid. I can't remember the guy's name. Tim, maybe? Tim picture. So yeah, since then we had a guy named Ahalopuka. Ahalopuka, I'm not really sure how you're supposed to pronounce that, but Puka has joined. He's got the Warcraft 3 Orc Peon profile picture. That's a classic one, but he's been grinding. He's been playing Cosmo. He learned how to beat the AI. Seems like more of a casual player overall. And he said something like, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this game. Is this addiction? Something like that. So shout out to Puka, Halo, however you're supposed to pronounce your name, dude. I feel like very similar to Puta, and that's obviously a very rude word to say about somebody's mom. So I don't recommend saying that. But Puka, yeah, sure. That's probably not a bad word. But yeah, shout out to him. We also have Unsaid, who joined semi recently. They also figured out how to defeat the AI. So pretty cool stuff, pretty cool stuff. Those are the two people who have been most active out of those who have joined the server recently. But I will extend a welcome back to Adunai. I'm not sure how you're supposed to actually pronounce this dude's name because he's got like weird accents in him. And Mirroring, who joined more recently. And we'll see if they end up hanging out with their wangs out, as I used to say back in the day. Always nice to throw out like little words and phrases you used to say back in the day, just to keep everybody on edge. Is he going to do that again? You never know. Now we'll move on to talking about a new map. This new map is a map that, in my opinion, should be a pretty fun one to take a look at. And yeah, it's Sigma. It's Sigma XY. This is a map by the Shambler and Biddy, apparently. It's got those infested platform stuff in the top left, top right, and bottom left. Your spawns are X and Y. On the clock, it would be like 10, and I guess by extension, it would be 4. 10 and 4. 10-4 on that one, homie. And, you know, you've got your... main base, it's fairly spacious, I think. It's like, okay, middling size on that. Pretty low build space in the natural, but you can see this little ramp complex here thing that you can use to build high ground defense into your natural area, which might bias players to be a little bit more exploitative of the neutral stuff over here, which is a potentially interesting change. Once you get out of your general sphere, looking at the way that the map plays out, you can kind of go this way directly to your opponent's potential third base or fourth base, which is like the interior base here. Or you can obviously wrap around and try to meet them in the middle. I like the middle of the map. The middle of the map has pretty decent architecture, and I think is an interesting set of ideas. I'm not sure how well the sides of the map lay into each other. Bridges obviously are going to funnel the pathability of stuff. You could maybe even see an argument to extend this bridge out to the left and this bridge out to the right quite a bit there, at least by like 2 more tiles. That would potentially help with the mobility of armies down the sides. But if you want to keep the center to be like the high area of action, then I guess there's that. Obviously, these neutral bases are mineral only and have treasuries, very evocative of Axiom. And I think that's actually what this is supposed to be or something. Like it's like an XY variant of some of those maps with obviously different architecture, different aspects. So at least that's what I was told, that I think something like that is what I was told. Not 100% sure. You can see there's some unbuildable terrain over here on the high ground with the solar array and such. And yeah, you got the organ tiles. Obviously, I've got to add more organ tile variants. And I might decide to try to change the like visual coloration and stuff. Really, I think it's the center tile that probably needs to be adjusted. So maybe we can think about doing that. Or I don't know if Baelithal will ever have the ability and time to kind of adjust his work on that, because he made the center tile. Maybe we can find a way to tweak that in a way that still looks pretty good. But either way, that's not related to this map specifically. Cool to see another space platform map with an interesting center. I don't know about taking a third base. I think you'd always want to take 9 and 3. And I guess that does kind of naturally bias you towards using the sides of the map. So there is that. But this is a map that is available in Class 2. If you're interested in playing it. Of course, it's always hard to get games on Class 2 maps during tournament season, but maybe once some of the homies have like qualified, or you specifically look at the players who aren't playing in the tournament or whatever, maybe that with those people you'd have an easier time grabbing somebody on a Class 2 map. And thus ends the community roundup, as this is the only map that has actually been worked on and sent a picture of in the server that isn't just like a small update or tweak to the existing maps. I guess I'll quickly show one map, however, because it's pretty epic, and it's a map that I would say is, it might not be immediately recognizable. It is Rage Slave, but if you believe it or not, I have converted the middle of the map into the asteroid tiles and also into low ground. We've got the low ground coming out into the sort of midsection here. And so it's like a ramp on top of a bridge into the what was the center, right? And so I think this is pretty interesting as a revision because it makes the map a little bit more defensible because of the cliff advantage, obviously. However, there is a little bit of I guess you could say, an added concern where imagine we've got people spawning and the red and blue start locations at, I guess this is 10 and this would be 3, then if somebody takes this base, say the blue spawn takes this base on the low ground, and the red guy can drop or run around over here and start using cliff advantage against the workers, that is something that is an added little issue, potentially. So not sure about that one. There's like some hyper-specific situations where that kind of thing can occur, because obviously it is a cliff advantage. So, maybe we'll see about doing something about that. But I think more likely than that is we just have ourselves, an interesting map to take a look at. So we shall see. But I just wanted to quickly show that off. I was pretty proud of being able to say that I managed to do that. So glad I was able to do that. GG's. Manifesting in the bottom left of your screen, and of course always in the description of the videos, are a way for you to click a link and then find your way to our Ko-fi page. Our Ko-fi page allows you to donate towards project development, and if you subscribe monthly, you get perks, like being able to ask questions and get answers. And that is where we are kicking things off today. We're going to be starting off with Myrian's question, who asks, all Pangea, Onitar, and Cosmonarchy factions are allied and coordinated with full knowledge of the Keltar's capabilities, and they are against a single Keltar regent. Who wins? Well, the short answer is the factions that have allied with each other. I think even if you just took one of those games, like specifically, I think Pangea, maybe the Keltar would still win, because Pangea is like a very different kind of technology, and it's very, like if Keltar show up inside Pangea, that's a bad news for the Keltar. But if the Pangea guys are outside of the Pangea itself, the super construct, then it's bad news for them, right? So if you were able to somehow suspend that part of the world rule or whatever and say that they operated at their relative level of strength, technologically speaking, but weren't dependent on their environment to live, then we would probably say Pangea would be the least consequential and thus maybe the most vulnerable to the Keltar. And so if it was just Pangea versus one Keltar region, the Keltar probably wins. I think with the Onitar factions, if you had all 4 of them, and I'm thinking of one commander for each faction versus one Keltar commander. That's how I'm conceptualizing this question. I think that's what it's meant to be. I would say one Keltar regent probably, I think maybe that's that's like a 60-40, maybe narrowly in favor of Keltar. And, I've described Onitar factions before as being roughly comparable to Cosmonarchy factions. So I would say maybe Onitar and Cosmonarchy, Entropic are the ones that, they could actually, in the early stages of the game, if you put Entropic inside Xibalba and gave them easier access to resources as a result of that, they'd be able to spam their units out a little bit faster, or get their big units operational a little bit faster, but they'd fall off really hard when tier 2 hit, right? And so in the early stages of the game, Entropic could actually do okay in some cases. And so that's what's making me think that because the others could just be fodder and delay the Keltar from being able to do too much, then I would say that the Entropic would probably be able to spike up. If you get Entropic and Blood Summon tech in a good spot, then Mankind can be spammy and harassy and tie up the Keltar forces, because Keltar have less numbers in the early stages of the game. So I'd say that something like that would probably be the case. That would be the path to victory anyway, is just relying on the Entropic for the big bad guns. If the Mankind player, commander, was able to get to high tier tech, they could maybe do some artillery and siege barrages. So there's that as well. But I think you'd be relying on Entropic. You'd be relying on harassment from the other 3, and maybe some of the tech from the Blood Summon to allow them to teleport across the map and stuff. So there is that as well. And so, yeah, I would say that's slightly favored for Keltar. So again, 60-40. That's a tough one to call. I think for Cosmonarchy, it might even be a little bit closer than Onitar. That might be like a 55-45 in favor of the Keltar. Mostly because I'm also factoring in Ascozi. If there wasn't an Ascozi one, then it's more handily a Keltar victory. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to if you factor in Ascozi, then you'd be in a healthier spot for the Cosmo homies, and so the Crescilient sector would theoretically send it representatives and get some stuff going on. Protoss units would have the strongest time versus Keltar units, like the most even matchup, and it would still be very much Keltar favored. But, you're talking about like one basic Keltar melee infantryman capable of like cleaving through, Mavericks in 1 or 2 hits and, dealing out quite a bit of damage and taking quite a bit of damage to take. Like the real threat, as fast as they would kill stuff and carve through stuff, the real threat would be the fact that they sustain so much punishment before going down that, you're talking about like, you might need like 5 or 6 phalanx shots in siege mode to bring down like one Keltar unit. You know what I mean? So it's a pretty big mismatch there, and so I think that's probably what the Keltar would use to their advantage, is the fact that they have the ability to deploy fairly quick, like very very quickly. They can deploy very very durable combatants that the other races are going to have a really hard time dealing with. So Pangea would be easily overwhelmed by Keltar, I think. That's probably like a 80-20 or something, maybe even more lopsided. I would say Onitar stands a better chance if they play to their strengths when it comes to the entropic stuff, and try to like bide time for that. And Cosmonarchy might stand the best of chances, but again, I think it comes down to like, I think upon further inspection, I would say that maybe Onitar actually stands the best of chances. The Onitar races might stand the best of chances. Cosmonarchy, even when you factor in the Escozi, I feel like they probably can't do too much. So I think the Keltar forces just hit too hard, basically. There is that. Whereas like at least like if you had like 5 Zergs versus 1 Keltar, it would just take a while for them to clean house. If you have one of each Cosmonarchy Chrysilian race, then like you just don't have the numbers to distract them and harass them and tie their forces up, and you end up getting just stuffed by the superior power. So that's what I would say would happen with that. Thanks for your question, Myrian. All right, we're going to be answering the Shambler's question up next. And, Shambler always asks, questions that require me to think outside the box and provide myself some brain activity. And so I'm going to have a sip of a caffeine-infused beverage. And sometimes those caffeine-infused beverages are coffee. And you could donate using our coffee link to give me more caffeine-infused beverages. I mean, that is one side effect. So really, it's a funny situation, because if Shambler didn't donate, maybe I wouldn't need as many coffee or coffee-like substances. And then, Shambler obviously wouldn't be asking these kinds of questions, so I wouldn't be constantly like using all of my brain activity to try to answer them, and it wouldn't be so theoretical. But because he donates, and I do appreciate him donating, I do need to answer those kinds of questions, and therefore you guys should probably donate some more so that I can have more answers, better answers, faster answers to Shambler's questions. Really, it's because Shambler's donating that you have to donate. I think that's a fair assumption to make. So taking a sip. All right, let's take on the AI question here, because the Shambler asks, you are tasked with creating a setting where all sufficiently advanced AI inevitably seek to meld with or gain dominion over biological life in order to harness or control some fundamental aspect of its existence. What is this motivational aspect of biological life within the setting you create? And how would it affect a story you would seek to tell within that world? So let's remove the AI part of this just so that we can properly explain my interpretation of the question, because when you have these kinds of setting-based questions where there's like a lot of moving parts or whatever, it can be helpful to do that. So let's talk about the fact that the questions basically proposing a premise where biological life within this custom setting that we're making has some kind of unique capacity or trait that gives it some kind of advantage. And we can say, since we'll probably make an RTS or some kind of game where a setting where you could build a strategy game out of it or whatever, we'll say that it's related to war or harvesting resources or something like that. Maybe some mana within this, the average living entity could be exploited, could be utilized and exploited by artificial creation or by other biological creations for the purposes of, fueling war efforts, right? We could imagine a world where, this is something that as far as I remember reading about in the one book of the Warhammer 40k setting that I read that I can't remember the title of and can't remember very many details of, there was some blurb at some point where they talked about how, like, I think it was thousands, but it might have even been as ridiculous as to say millions, but many psychers, psionic entities within the 40k universe were sacrificed simply to fuel the God Emperor's fight against chaos. And like the sacrifice of those psychers provided some kind of fuel, energy, whatever, that was used as ammunition in a way for the God Emperor to wage his war against chaos, such that he could prevent them from entering into this domain and consuming all life, or something equally apocalyptic. That's my very low resolution, unfamiliar understanding of what is going on there. And so we could imagine a world where, like, you just have some kind of power within you. You could even call it magic. You could call it whatever you would like. And the point is that you have this capacity as a biological entity, similar to blood, right? Similar to, mitochondria, whatever you want to say. There's something about your biological makeup that fuels something related to a war effort, right? There's a couple of things that I've already thought of and come up with that I haven't done anything with in the modern era, but I was designing a fantasy series where the setting was basically that similar to blood, similar to having like cells in general. Magic was just a biological reality. You had the ability to manipulate magic based on essentially your genetics, but also based on like the concentration of, it's not, I guess, like, I don't really know what George Lucas was thinking with the midichlorians in Star Wars, but it's kind of like that in the sense that it seems to be something that you just have at birth. And, it can be modulated. It can be, there's like a range of power levels that you can achieve based on that. And presumably, depending on how avant-garde the magic can actually be, how arcane things can actually get, maybe your magic can actually just straight up foment additional magic. And you could imagine a runaway effect where somebody else transfers their power into you and thus gives you more of this like magical, whatever biological component it is. Like if it's some kind of biological compound that generates magic or manipulates magic, it was something in my setting that tapped into the ether around you, that magic permeated the plane, and the ability to control it was really what you were born with. And your ability to control it is like both a skill, like a muscle that you need to exercise, but also something that is gated by some sort of biological reality, in the same way that like how tall you are will in some way inform how fast you can run and how high you can jump and stuff like that, right? And so obviously like how far up a shelf you can reach, like very mundane things as well. And so that was basically one of the things that I came up with. So we could imagine then like that would be useful. There was a setting where I was thinking, this is back when I was still trying to fuck around with like making something in Warcraft 3 as like a conversion or a campaign or something like that. I came up with the idea that demons would actually harvest blood, not the Burning Legion demons, just like my own personal demons. And so I remember thinking that it's kind of interesting because like this is back when I was willing to be a lot more experimental with race mechanics, to the point where like the demon race was not even going to harvest gold. Or maybe it would still harvest gold, but it wouldn't harvest lumber. It was something like that, where one of the two key resources of Warcraft 3 weren't actually going to be involved for the demons. And instead they would harvest blood, including like, they'd be able to migrate blood, basically corpse piles or whatever, mass graves, etc., through construction attempts, and then harvest them from there. But they would also be able to obviously like harvest from corpses itself. That idea was never going to work in Warcraft 3 because you don't have much control over the like reverse engineering and modding and stuff. So that would never have worked. But the concept probably also wasn't very good for an RTS. It was just one of those interesting ideas that I had where I was like, well, yeah, I guess maybe demons would harvest blood. And so that would be like a biological case where you're like using blood for it. You could imagine, I'm sure there's like sci-fi settings like this where like in order to power like a giant mech of some kind, I'm thinking grim dark aesthetic similar to Warhammer 40k, but in order to power a giant mech, you have to actually like hook it into your body in such a way that it can basically siphon your blood in order to power it. And maybe you're not the only pilot, you're actually just a battery, right? And they basically have these like blood batteries of some kind. I'm sure there's a setting out there that plays around with that kind of thematic, whether it's a core thing or just a sideshow. But either way, these are a couple of ideas that you could imagine would be relevant to what Shambler is asking here. So if we're going to then have machinations, artificial creations, AI, etc., take advantage of this, then we could make it a mundane enough answer that it just happens to be something that you can control magic with. And historically, golems, these sorts of, what would you call them? Constructs, right, have not really been able to interface with magic because they don't have the mechanism to do so, right? They're artificial, and there have been attempts at like imbuing them with magic, but it's nothing like you can imbue an object with properties, inanimate or not, and those properties will persist for depending on how long your magic is. How powerful your magic is, I should say. And that is one thing to say, but in order to give a construct the ability to manipulate magic itself, that would be something that would be like, if it were invented, it would quite literally be revolutionary because, up until the point that where it comes into fruition, that kind of thing would not be possible. And maybe it would have been like theorized and attempted a few times, but also dangerous, right? And so now if you flash forward in a setting that has this sort of magic as a biological reality, then maybe the way that what it happens is that like sentience is granted to this artificial creation, and it seeks to benefit from the biological life in that way, and knows that in order to guarantee its survival, in order to thrive as a faction within an RTS type story, then you're probably going to need to use that kind of magic because otherwise you're going to be at a very heavy disadvantage. Maybe it informs all sorts of like small things like your defense against like there's all sorts of like little details about like electronic warfare and stuff. Like the in-universe justification for Chrysilient tech centers is that like jamming or other such details, like the distance of space to transmit information, etc. All of those things are going to stop you from just being able to immediately deploy certain pathways, and so you spend money on these expensive centers of technology. And you go for this sort of idea that like, okay, we're going to localize and regionalize our tech, and that's going to be enough, right? It doesn't quite explain in a diegetic manner why like your ally building an atlas doesn't give you Terran tier 2, but that you could come up with some kind of admittedly cop out situation potentially where it's like, well, that's because it has to be keyed to the frequency shared by your production structures, otherwise wires get crossed and the signal gets diluted and you can't use it or something like that. But anyway, all that to be said, it's all like there's ideas there where it's like electronic warfare. The reason why I compare that to like this setting that I'm trying to build out for Shambler's question is you're talking about a situation where if you're able to, if you don't have magic, maybe you just die to like the first magic thing that happens. Like maybe there's a really obvious magical attack vector that is opened up by utilizing magic that without being able to control magic yourself, you just die. It's like an immune reaction almost, like they can disassemble an automaton very easily by using magic because that's why they were so dominant over it, right? And then like the first anti-magic comes in and it's literally just like this sort of blood battery that we were talking about, but for the purpose of like constantly imbuing it with some sort of counter spell or whatever, if we want to use gently dip into like D&D verbiage here. And so you could imagine something like that where, okay, sure, mages would imbue their armor, their like golems with that sort of thing, but it would eventually run out because it wouldn't be self-propagating. Whereas if the construct took over and enslaved or whatever, dominated biological entities that were there for that, then they could actually extract out the resource in that way and then force them to somehow interface with them, control them, whatever, in order to do so. So I think that's probably where I would go. I know that's not a sci-fi thing, strictly speaking, because it's like, we're talking about magic, but you could imagine I guess a science fantasy setting where you are in the future and magic exists as a biological reality, and it's more like science or something like the X-Men powers or whatever, and it's less like it's less like D&D in that way, where you're just sort of like fabricating reality in that way. So hopefully that was an interesting answer there. That obviously took a little bit of time, but we are going to jump into Three Crow's question now. And Three Crow asks, You must take one cornerstone from each race, Protoss, Terran, Zerg, and Ascozi, and swap it with a cornerstone from another race. What would you change, and what are a few units from each race that would best represent the changes? So this is an interesting question. I've had questions about like changing cornerstones and stuff, but I don't think it's been formatted in this exact way. So I do believe this is a novel take on the, make a Terran like Zerg or make a Zerg like Protoss or whatever. So I guess first things first, I'm going to identify a cornerstone for Terran, for example, because they're like the first race from left to right in my brain. And I'm going to look at a cornerstone there and I'm going to say, okay, this one I could do without, but I have to basically replace it with something of equal significance from another race. So if I take Reclamation, I'd have to give it Infestation or something like that, because like that would be equally powerful and equally potent, because you're talking about asset seizure, right? You're talking about the ability to raise the dead or whatever. So I don't think I'm going to do Reclamation, because I do think that's very iconic, despite being limited to a few units. Maybe that's like the less is more principle in action, right? So I think what I could see happening is that we could swap the transformation of units, the unit transforms from Terran. That's Masters of None. Thinking about Matadors, Shamans, obviously, eventually the iconic Phalanx, of course, but eventually the Cuirass and the Savant. And we're thinking about a cornerstone to replace that. If we're thinking about the slot that's in, that would be like flash shielding, regression, or interlocking mechanisms. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the exact ranking per se. It's usually the asset seizure is the final cornerstone there. For Ascozi, the asset seizure is not actually a cornerstone listed. But it's the hijack ability. So we might want to factor that in. Like Terran also has like a pseudo cornerstone with kinetic penetration and stuff. So there might be little things like that where you have like these repeating patterns that haven't been memorialized as a cornerstone in that way. But I think what we could probably do with regards to the Terran arsenal is we could replace the... I'm going to actually go, this might be a bold choice. I'm going to replace Masters of None with Regression, and I'm basically going to make it so that rather than having the Terran combatants deploy into alternative modes at will, it would be more like once you deploy them, you can choose to deploy the unit, and it's like that until it takes fatal damage in that way. And so you could imagine a situation where you spend some money and resources to deploy the Phalanx in tank mode into a siege mode Phalanx. And then that confers different behaviors. Maybe it fires a different projectile, like a kinetic pen or something like that, because of the fact that you want guaranteed damage, basically, if you're going to be spending such a high time cost and et cetera into the idea. But then, if the enemy engages upon your Phalanxes and deals fatal damage to them, they would regress back into the other form, right? And so that would basically be like them destroying like the exterior armor, right? And maybe we would even go a step further and say that like, well, once that destruction has occurred, you actually can't turn it back in, but that would be something different. I'm just going to go straight up and like copy and paste, like move this thing over. But imagine then, Phalanxes, Matadors, things that, you'd have to use some changes to the units to afford this, but things that basically you're like planting your flag and you're saying, this is where I am standing. I am not moving from this position until you forcefully remove me from it. And even then, the odds of my units surviving, if they've been regressed, are not very high. Whereas it's a little bit different for Zerg, where like you could see a bunch of the units getting regressed and only a few of them actually getting killed a second time. It's a little bit different when you have less units, as the Terrans often do. So that would be my choice for Terran. By the way, that doesn't necessarily mean I would take Zerg and give them the transform. I was kind of thinking about giving the Zerg like I guess this is where we do get a little bit concerned, right? Because we're talking about like swapping it from a cornerstone. Does that mean that can we like shuffle, or does it have to be a straight up swap? If it has to be a straight up swap, then I guess we would probably lean further into things like the Lechizalisk, where it burrows. That would be kind of considered the form switch. Or we could go in with the idea that I had a while ago, where it was like rooting into the ground. I guess that's kind of like what swarm hosts do or did at one point in StarCraft 2. It's hard to remember all the different renditions of it, admittedly. But when you're talking about a situation where it's like the swarm host roots itself into the ground, and that allows it to use its weapon, we we would probably do something a little bit more nuanced than just disallowing access to the weapon while in the mobile mode. But that's sort of like what we already do with Terrans, right? Is like we give them different weapons, or we give them different, more boosted capabilities, but also, again, different capabilities at the cost of losing mobility. That would be one of the such examples. So if that was the case, we would probably say, like, we could give Bactylisks back the Kagra spread that they had way back, like, years and years ago, where they had that while burrowed. Well, instead, if they can deploy into some kind of Kagra generator, then maybe they would gain additional range, only like +2. It wouldn't be too significant, but they would lose their mobility and they would spread Kagra over time, right? That would be like one such change. Definitely a bona fide tier 2 unit by that point, because you're talking about the extra range and, the capacity to spread Kagra. I think if we're talking about the Lucifirius, rooting instead of burrowing, that means that it would no longer be concealed from attackers. So I think it would probably need to... maybe it would need to fire like a second projectile, and so they would almost be like in a, I want to say like I don't know why I'm thinking, I don't know how to describe the pattern I'm thinking, but it's like two of them like side by side with like a very small gap in between that wouldn't allow it to actually miss its primary target. And so it's like it's just like a pattern of two. It's like two spokes of a fork stabbing forward, right? That's sort of what I'm thinking, is that the Lucifirius would need something like that because it can be attacked freely without needing detection, right? And so it's a little bit more vulnerable, so maybe we would give it a little bit more deeps. However, if it already does some pretty good damage as it is, that might just make it really, really strong. So I have to think about that. But I do know that like Ovaleths and like the Ovaleth would probably be able to root to detect and spread Kagra. The Iroleth would just be able to detect without needing to root, but when it rooted, maybe it would spawn larvae, things like that. And then of course there's that Agroleth unit concept that I had a while ago that hopefully we can implement at some point later on, where the you would go into a situation where like basically the unit is supposed to root and then you can return resources to it, so it's kind of like a mobile town center, but it wouldn't spawn larvae, right? And so that would be like you'd have a couple of these different ideas that you could do. So yeah, I'd say that's probably where I'd go with that. And so, yeah, that's like that's one such case. Man, this is going to take a little bit. I guess I'll just swap one Protoss and a Scozy Cornerstone to finish that off. I was debating swapping Flash Shielding, but they're the only race with shields, so I'm not quite sure about that one. So let me look at the Scozy Cornerstones with the idea that we're going to be using them for the Protoss. I don't think we can really use the team building thing. The leap and charge thing could be like refocused around things like the Legionnaire and the Cabbalists. So cybernetic supremacy could definitely be swapped. And then what would we swap it for? Because on the Protoss side, yeah, I think we'll probably take the Scozy cybernetic supremacy, because I can already see how you would apply that to the existing set of units. But would you give them Vengeful Ascension then? I feel like Vengeful Ascension has been a sleeper hit Cornerstone. Like for a while, people didn't really feel like it was that significant or consequential. When it got visuals, people realized how often it was proccing, and then it got buffed recently, so people were like, oh damn, it's actually really good. And now I think it is very thematic to be able to engage into certain situations with it. But it's also one of those things that you need to actually like experience a few times in order to really understand, oh yeah, this is valuable. It might not be immediately powerful on paper or something like that. I don't think we can ditch Tyranny of the Sun, so I think we might have to do Vengeful Ascension, because I don't want to bother trying to... I feel like Divine Mandate is kind of a cop-out situation, because the Ascozi, you're not immediately aware of how the Ascozi tech progression works intuitively, so saying that the Ascozi have Protoss tech progression, it's not as impactful as if I said that about Terran or Zerg, because you'd immediately be able to think, oh shit, that actually does make a pretty big difference. So I think that's a lame answer. So I guess we'd take Cybernetic Supremacy and we would give them Vengeful Ascension. The Ascozi units that would use Vengeful Ascension would probably be the same units that can leap and jump, and because some of those units are very expendable in the sense that you're expected to throw a bunch of them at your opponent and use them for hit and runs and run-bys and stuff, and so there would be a self-synergy there where you'd be similar to how, like, when you have a stack of vassals and one of them dies, that gives you movement speed to move the stack elsewhere, bob and weave in and out of fights. It's actually a self-synergizing situation. You would imagine something like that about the proselyte, for example, which is like the expendable infantry unit that jumps. If you imagine that unit providing ascension when it died, well, some kind of speed boost rather when it died, that would be one such example, right? because Ascension is obviously attack speed, so it would be imagine it being avenged, etc. And so I think that would probably be the way that we would go about it, is we would just make the Escozi more about linear mobility as opposed to like whatever you would call the mobility where you're jumping around and bypassing threats and stuff. Then we have, obviously, we're replacing Vengeful Ascension with the technological supremacy option cybernetic supremacy option from the Escozi. So that gives you the ability to say, hey, Legionnaires, you can jump to any allied unit. Hey, Kabbalists, you can jump to any allied unit or maybe enemy unit, right? And so it's one of those situations. We could also give it to maybe one of the units that is like very bulky. Imagine if like Pariahs had that, or maybe like one of the tier 3 Unitary Union robotics that isn't actually out yet. You could imagine a situation like that where maybe it's a unit that typically doesn't have a lot of mobility, but can synergize with other units within some kind of radius. Or rather than give that kind of unit the ability, maybe it would be the inverse, where you'd have something like maybe instead of the Pariah leaping, the Pariah could call other units to it. And by that, I mean like basically it could target any allied unit and pull it towards it. And that would be like a behavior that it had, an ability that it had. So something like that could definitely be the case. I think you could have a situation where maybe Mind Tyrants could be able to do that as well, because it's sort of like a domineering idea that they could just like pull units around. Of course, your own units. I wouldn't really allow you to pull units into yourself, enemy units into yourself, but I guess that's something you could think about too. So yeah, I think that's probably what I would do. And I hope that has answered the question adequately enough, sir. Thank you for that question. We're going to answer HitEmUp's question here, and then we have one more from Lucifirius. So HitEmUp asks, if you could take players from any era in Cosmonarchy or even in the professional Brood War scene and match them for show matches in Cosmonarchy right now, what would your choices be? So let's think about the players that we have had in the past that we don't have anymore when it comes to Cosmonarchy players, because I think that that's the full spirit of the question, is like talking about our history, like our community's history. So I would think of players like Keen, aka Little Chava, who I know that HitEmUp is actually familiar with. He was always a very chill guy. He liked spamming out like a ridiculous number of units and like exploring the tech tree and stuff. He didn't play too often, didn't get too much practice done, but he did 7 pool or 6 pool maybe Shambler at one point, so that was good. And I think he got 6 pooled by Shambler as well. There was like some very tight 5-game series between him and Shambler at one point, like in the earlier days. So very cool stuff, very cool, interesting, memorable moments, right? I would actually say another one that it would be cool to see is Zopies. I feel like Zopies is a guy, I did shout him out at one point semi-recently on a Flashback Friday, so that might not come as a surprise that he's sort of tip of the tongue. But I do think that when we're in the situation talking about stuff like that, he just had a style to him. Yeah, he would always go bio, but it was just a cool guy, right? Like, I feel like that's the kind of thing that when you're trying to figure out things about the like how the game works, and you're just constantly using the same sort of thing over and over again, it is pretty good, man. It is pretty fun, in my opinion. The idea that you've got this guy who will stick to the same style no matter what, and he plays it and he enjoys it, and that's his thing. Like, he loves playing bio. He will always play bio. He's the Maverick man, and for him to have success and like be able to take players close and stuff, that was really cool as well. So I would think. I would also take Benno, but from the older days, because I haven't seen Benno's Modern Terran, so I don't know what he's like. But the older Benno days, where he would spam out Cyprians and Mavericks like to a ridiculous degree, and just like build nothing but those, like in the early Ascensions, dude. Benno was a legend in that respect. And I think putting him against Zopies would be an amazing fucking TVT, where it's just straight up Bioman all the time. That could be really funny. Even though it's a mirror match, I actually think it would be really good. So that would be like a good show match. We're talking about Keen. I might do all mirrors. Who would Keen and his style go up against really well from any era in Cosmonarchy? And matching him up with a modern one. I guess like that's where I'm saying, like, even though I said Benno and he's a modern player, imagining like older Benno, maybe that's a bit of a cop-out, because he's talking about like matching up an older player with a newer player or a modern player. So which modern player would I take? I would actually take Luai. I think Luai, I think that's how you're pronouncing the guy's name. He is a cool dude. his first ever games against a human was against Arbuz. He's also learning the project. He's also just like kind of winging it in a way and like just using old experience with RTS games. I think him and Keen would absolutely have a funny time. The alternative player for that would be Art of Turtle, since they're both NA, aficionados or alumnus or alumni. Yeah, that would be another option too. But I think Luai, just because they're both like, they don't really have good knowledge, but they have pretty sound RTS mechanics. I would love to see a show match like that, especially with like the wacky game modes. They have no fucking idea what's going on, dude. It would just be absolutely absurd. So I'm thinking of one other player at some point who played against Krankendau in casted sets that I did with, who was it? It was, I know I did it with Neblime at one point, and I'm just, I'm trying to remember where that kind of thing came from, because I can't remember how far back the video was, but I know that it was a game cast with Neblime, and it was one of those things where we played a bunch of, there was a bunch of games that Krankendau played with this guy. He played out Terran and tried Terran, and then he switched over to Zerg. So I guess I'm kind of breaking my rule if I use this guy, because he's got the different, he's got the ideas of where he's like playing Protoss. If we're trying to play Protoss for the mirrors, I guess we would say like, I immediately almost want to say Hapsea, because he's like not as the older player, but as like the current player. I guess I could cheat and say Ecalypso. He did technically play semi recently, but he was grinding it out a lot. Maybe instead of that, I'll just also nominate Krankendau himself, because I do miss the guy. I hope he's doing well. I would say that he's really like, he's a Zerg that thinks about the game, right? And so I think that's actually really cool, is to see stuff like that. And I would love to see just basically how that kind of thing could take shape and how it could evolve over time. Because when we're thinking about how the game actually works, we do need to see people who try to innovate build orders. And the reason we even had Larvosk first, I mean, maybe I'm sure somebody else could have eventually come up with this, but Krankendau just sat down, mathed it out, and said, you get resources, gas at the same rate as minerals early on, relatively similar rates. So the Larvosk is just less money overall. So that's cheaper than Hatch First. And it also builds faster. It has a shorter build time. So it's just better. It's like 25 minerals cheaper, or maybe more than that. And it's obviously like, I don't know, like if you add up the resources together, because they have the same gather rates in the early game, then it's like 50 minerals cheaper, or 50 resources cheaper rather, or something like that, and it builds faster. So it's like a no-brainer. And like his hypothesis was proven right. So I'm trying to think about like a Zerg player or any player that he could go up against that does actually do those kinds of active theory crafting. I guess maybe it would be really cool to have him play against Hamster, because Hamster does a lot of like wild theory crafting himself, or like at least he comes up with like really cool set pieces, like pimpist plays or whatever. I still remember him using an envoy to bring over a pylon onto high ground, as well as one legionnaire. He tags the pylon with his legionnaire, and then 40 more legionnaires appear in the base, right? And he's like elevatoring them in with the pylon teleport. Like that shit was good. And I can't remember which legit game he did it in, but he's come up with other builds before too, like the Legionnaire Kabbalist timing that was just wrecking face for a little while. And I don't know why he doesn't stick with it. That's the funny thing about Hamster. Krankendau will stick to a build when he sees that it's working, or he thinks that it can work. But Hamster will find a lot of success with a build, and then he'll just decide not to use it anymore. It's like, that's too good. I need a tougher challenge. So, like, that's just such a bizarre and awesome mindset to have, and I do appreciate having him in the community for that reason and many others. So, I'll say Krankendau versus Hamster will be my last one. I know that's not like a PvP or whatever, because, like, actually it would be a ZVZ in the modern day, because Hamster's playing a Zerg. So we did 2 ZVZs and 1 TVT, but yeah, those are some samplings there for what I might decide to do. And lastly, we do have Lucifirius' question. He always has some funny, punchy questions that I can look at and say, oh yeah, that's epic, that's cool. And as we go through and take a look at it, he's asking, favorite alliteration on Discord. So, what's my favorite usage of alliteration on the server? So if you guys don't know, we do have a bunch of like alliteration-based names for a few places. Particularly, we have, I guess we mostly have it in Like we have Artism Isle as a public one. We've got Dad-Oriented Design. I would count that as a public one. And then I'm trying to think if we have anything else. Technically, we have like Good Games Exist, but like the third word isn't G, so I don't know if that really counts. Scrolling through the other public channels, I think that might be it. I mean, we do have the Pickup Partner as a sponsor, and our D&D game is called the Paladin Partner, but that, like that's not a public-facing one. But I will say, and this is the obvious answer to this question, is that we have Chad's Charming Chapel as the donator exclusive category of things, and within that is Cause Content Cauldron, and content is CAWNTENT. And Cauldron is CAWLDRON. And then we have Ahmed's Arson Isle, and the voice channel is Tony's Talking Tower. Those are obviously way more banger alliterations, just objectively. But also, Ahmed's Arson Isle has Ahmed in it, and it's where money goes. Like, if you're in that channel, it's because you're either, like, on the staff or you pay money. And so I have to say that that's my favorite one. That's just obvious. That's of course. So that is where I come down on that. Thank you for the question, Lucy, and hope everything is going well, my homie. I do appreciate all of your support. And that will close us out for the show. I hope you've enjoyed Prototype episode 70. It is tourney time. Videos will be back starting tomorrow. I mistakenly said at some point earlier on that there's a casted series that was already released. It's not already released. I misspoke on that. It will be released very soon. So if you're watching this and it's been more than a day, we did not misspeak. It is already released. But if you're watching this on the day of, that's where it's at. So GG boys, we'll be back very soon for more action. I hope you guys have a great old time.